This is the location where a noblewoman was tortured and burnt at the stake for the crime of witchcraft. Sidonia von Borcke was accused of black magic. They threw 72 horrific charges at her. They claimed she slept with the devil. To the modern world, Sidonia became a legendary femme fatale, a dark muse who inspired Oscar Wilde's mother and the pre-Raphaelite artists of Victorian London. But to the judges who broke her on the rack, it wasn't an act of madness. It was a cold, legal science. We are outside the Pomeranian Duke's Castle in Szczecin, Poland. A 72-year-old noblewoman was tortured and executed after being accused of witchcraft. Her trial took place in this castle, and the judges who condemned her were guided by books exactly like this one. 400 years ago, this was the centre of one of the most famous witch trials in Northern Europe. A noblewoman named Sidonia von Borcke was accused of using witchcraft to destroy the ruling house of Griffin, the dynasty that governed Pomerania for centuries. She didn't just curse individuals, she cursed an entire bloodline, and when members of that dynasty began dying without heirs, people believed her curse was real. But what interests me isn't the trial itself. It's the book that made trials like this possible. Sidonia von Borcke was born into the Pomeranian nobility during the 16th century. She never married. She became involved in bitter disputes with powerful members of the ducal family. Over time, she developed a reputation for being difficult, resentful, and dangerous. Then strange things began to happen. Members of the House of Griffin began dying unexpectedly. Young heirs died before producing children. Successors vanished one after another. To modern historians, this looks like a combination of disease, poor luck, and dynastic decline. However, to many people living at the time, it looked like something else. It looked like a curse. Rumours spread that Sidonia had cursed the dynasty, and as the accusations mounted, so did the deaths. Today, witch trials are often portrayed as outbreaks of irrational panic. But that is not how they were seen in the 17th century. The people who conducted these trials viewed themselves as participating in a genuine legal process. Witnesses were interviewed, testimony was collected, evidence was assessed, and judges consulted experts. The machinery of government was entirely convinced that witchcraft was real, and it was a threat. And when that happened, books became as important as chains in the judicial process. Sidonia was arrested, interrogated, tortured, and eventually she confessed. And like countless others accused of witchcraft in the 1600s, she was executed. But where did the judges learn to identify witches? How did they decide what counted as evidence? How did they justify torture? For many of these judges, those answers all came from books. This is my copy of Martin del Rio's Disquisitionum Magicarum, printed in 1679. This was one of the most influential works on magic and witchcraft after the Malleus Maleficarum. In many ways, this was an update from the Malleus Maleficarum, which was printed in the 1400s. It was a bit out of date by the time this came around. And so, by this time period in the 1600s, this was how you collected the evidence. This is how you identified a witch. And this goes into the full legal process of what to do. The author was a Jesuit scholar whose writings became enormously influential throughout Catholic Europe. This wasn't fringe literature. This wasn't something hidden away in obscure collections. It was read by judges and clergy, scholars, administrators. In many ways, it became a reference manual for understanding witchcraft. And what is most unsettling about the book is not that the author believed that witches existed. Almost everybody did. The unsettling part is just how systematic the work is. It presents itself as a very serious investigation, and it was. Evidence is weighed, arguments are considered, authorities are cited. Everything is arranged as though the existence of witchcraft is beyond dispute. Whether witches existed or not was not a question, it was obvious they existed. The book discusses pacts with demons, black magic, apparitions, demonic possession, supernatural attacks against people, animals, and crops. But he also discusses legal procedure. I mean, if someone's accused of crimes like that, how do you deal with it? Was Sidonia von Borcke actually responsible for the downfall of the House of Griffin? Maybe. Historians will point to illness, dynastic instability, political reasons. Yet those answers at the time would have been unacceptable, meaningless. Nearly. The people at the time saw a pattern. They had their suspect, and they had the evidence. She'd confessed. Once the machinery of accusation began, it was impossible to stop. If she was innocent, and wasn't a witch, it's one of the greatest tragedies to ever happen in Szczecin, in all of Pomerania, in Poland. Because what she was subjected to was awful. When people usually think about witches and witch trials, they usually think about superstition. But superstition rarely kills. Authority does. A rumour becomes testimony. Testimony becomes evidence. Evidence becomes law, and law becomes a sentence. Books like this help transform fear into certainty. They provided an intellectual framework for educated people to do unjustifiable acts. Standing in the castle where Sidonia von Borcke was tried and executed, and then holding a book that helped shape the world in which that trial occurred, you begin to realise something. The most dangerous ideas are rarely the ones that appear the most irrational. They're often the ones that are perfectly reasonable. 4 centuries later, the castle remains, the book remains, Sidonia does not.